So I've got two more entries into the anti-despair reading list. These ones are answering the question, what the hell is happening in the world right now? How does this make any sense? Both the books are by the same author. The author is the British writer John Higgs, and the first book is his Stranger Than We Can Imagine, An Alternative History of the 20th Century. As you can see, I've read the bejesus out of it. It's like peeling off and stuff like that. This is an amazing book. It's one of my favorite of all time. Higgs's main argument is that at the beginning of the 20th century, we thought we had everything figured out about the universe in the West. This is a Eurocentric book, by the way. And what he said is that basically starting with Einstein's theory of relativity, which took everything we knew about physics and threw it out the window, one after another, all of these different realms of human knowledge started falling apart in the 20th century. This happened in politics, where you had ancient regimes which were suddenly totally destroyed by World War I, and you had the rise of communism and fascism. In philosophy, you had the rise of these very strange ideologies like nihilism and postmodernism. In the field of art, you had Dadaism and Surrealism, which were just totally mind-bending things. And what he goes through is one after another, how all of these things that we were so sure about suddenly were gone in the 20th century, and we were casting about for certainty where there was none anymore. This book is just a little over 300 pages, but he covers everything. He covers modernism. He covers the sexual revolution. He covers the space race. He covers the rise of science fiction, the uncertainty principle of chaos theory, of growth-based economy, and of the internet. It's an astounding book. Now, Higgs actually did a follow-up to Stranger Than We Can Imagine called The Future Starts Here, which is his attempt at trying to apply the lessons of Stranger Than We Can Imagine to like what the 21st century is going to be like. It's not as successful of a book. It's still really good. It's still worth reading. I'm actually going to recommend instead his book, The KLF, Chaos, Money, Magic, and the Band Who Burned a Million Pounds. I do not have it. I keep lending it out because it is so good. The KLF book is actually his history of the band, the KLF, which existed in the 80s, 90s, and they were a rave band. And they were basically very anti-establishment, and they tried to do all of this stuff to, basically put their finger in the eye of the music industry. They went to the Brit Awards, and during their performance, they had a death metal band who screamed their songs at people, and they fired blanks into the audience. They left like a dead sheep on the front door of the award show. At one point, they dumped their entire catalog into the North Sea. And basically, anytime they did something that was designed to piss people off, the music industry is like, oh, it's just such great PR. Until they finally took a suitcase full of £1 million cash and they lit it on fire. And then they realized that that was the cardinal sin in the music industry, was throwing away money. As a history, this is fascinating, but the reason I put it on the anti-despair reading list is because at the beginning of the book, Higgs says, when I heard about the KLF lighting this money on fire, it didn't fit into my entire worldview. I couldn't conceive of a world in which something like that could happen. So what he said, I realized I needed to totally reconstruct my worldview. And so throughout the rest of the course of the book, he tells the story of the KLF and how they got to burning the money. But he also brings in all of this other crazy stuff like Doctor Who and Alan Moore and Discordianism, which is this entire chaos worshipping sort of religion. And he goes into how one can start to change their mind to deal with a chaotic and changing world. That is how I think one should respond to something like Stranger Than We Can Imagine, into these kind of like chaotic times. I genuinely can't recommend everything by John Higgs enough. He is a guy who looks at like the chaos and like terrifyingness of our modern world, and rather than being just scared and fearful, he is curious and hopeful about things, and his way of looking at the world just rubs off on you, and you're going to like suddenly not be as fucking depressed and are going to be a lot more interested in discovering what's going on in the world and how you can kind of build a mindset that might be a little bit more able to deal with what the world's throwing at you. So, John Higgs, 10 out of 10.